Welcome to the Loyal Opposition Podcast. I'm Bernie Flowers, one of Uncle Sam's wayward sons. I intend to talk about important topics every week in hopes of helping to improve our country and our way of life. I ask that you like, share, and subscribe as we try to grow the channel and defend America's middle class. So, let's get started. Mr. Broderick Thomas is an experienced advertising professional with a focus on digital media. His skills include digital strategy, sales, management, and marketing. He's also president of the Black Brick Society, of which I am a member. I have a few questions for him from his perspective. Broderick, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good, General. How are you?
Oh man, you keep promoting me every time we see each other.
I love it, man. I love it. I always tell you, even though you came out of the Air Force as a lieutenant colonel for the loyal opposition, you're the general on the field.
I'm not going to argue with you, man. I'm not
There
going to.
you
I
go.
know better than that. But Amanda, I've got a few questions for you, and I think that you are uniquely qualified to answer these questions, and I think the people would be very, very appreciative of hearing what you have to say. So, without any further ado, can we go ahead and get started?
Let's do it.
Outstanding. Well, first, let's talk about the presidential election. What policies and factors resonate with Black Americans given the competition between Mr. Trump and Ms. Harris?
For me, it's the financial piece. I remember the 4 years, or sharing with people, the 4 years that Donald Trump was president were the best 4 years financially for me. And I've had a lot of other people that I talked to say the same thing. The policies were in place. Unemployment was at its lowest rates. I think Black American households income had gone up by like 9%. So it was just all of those things. And I keep hearing Vice President Harris talk about the issues of getting things under control. But at the same time, I remember that she's part of the problem. You know, I was looking at some data the other day, and I'll have to send it to you sometime, but it was just comparing the gas prices from January of 2021 until now, the food prices, the rents, all of those things gone up. I mean, interestingly enough, rent prices generally increase about just over 3% annually. Starting in 2021, they were increasing on an average of over 6% annually. So these were the things that we saw happen. I mean, a gallon of milk went from, $3 to $4 and some change. All of these different things occurred. This was under Biden's and Harris's watch. So when you say you're going to fix these things, are you telling me that you're just trying to fix the things that you messed up in the first place? And if that's the case, how can I trust you for that? Because you haven't done it already. And so it's a lot of those issues. I think that for the most part, as a black man in America, really all we're looking for is a fair playing field, And so when we start to see the things of the illegal immigrants being brought into our country in hordes, and receiving all of these benefits, free housing and mortgage assistance out in California, free apartments, free all of these different things that they're getting. And the average Black American whose ancestry participated in building this country are not receiving any of that. And honestly, I don't even need any of that. I just want to take the restraints off that are in place when I go to look for things that can help my business, my family, my household. And so when I look between the two, it's hands down for me. It's really not a question. Even from I guess a morality standpoint, the idea of family and traditional family. The things that Donald Trump speak about are the things that align with me. And I just can't seem to find the vice president speaking on any of the issues that matter. I read an article where one of the commentators after her town hall was speaking about the word salad, they call it, that she uses. And sometimes when I listen to her, I'm just like, I don't understand what you're saying. And so if you can't convey a simple thought to me of what your plan is for America, for our economy, for our families, for our education, for our infrastructure, if you can't communicate those things to me, I apologize, Bernie. If you can't communicate those things to me, then I don't know why I would vote for you.
Well, that is a pretty comprehensive roundup, and I agree with everything you say. I mean, I saw that town hall, and I've seen most of her speeches, and again, they are circular in their thoughts. It's like you end up in the same place where you started, and she doesn't answer any questions. But I got another question for you, and I
Okay.
appreciate what you've said already. And again, I value your opinion because you're a very knowledgeable human being. But
Thank you, sir.
Joe Rogan, the famous podcast host, he hosted President Trump on the 25th of October. I watched their podcast and I was pretty impressed and I enjoyed it greatly. On the other hand, Mr. Rogan invited Vice President Harris and she declined the opportunity. Why would she decline the opportunity to appear in front of almost 100 million potential voters on the Rogan podcast, which happens to be the number one podcast in the entire world? Why would she turn that down?
Well, I guess two answers come to mind for me on that. One is I think we've seen in her track record that she doesn't interview well, right? So if they give her easy questions that she can gloss over and give a bunch of rhetoric to, she's fine. But when she starts getting very pointed and direct questions to where you have to give a specific answer to, she just doesn't do well. And so I would imagine her team is keeping her out of a lot of those situations. The same way Biden's team kept him out of a lot of public situations when they already knew what his condition was. So they're very smart. They're very strategic in how they do things. I'll give them that much. But I think that's just one of those things to where for her to go on Joe Rogan, and Joe Rogan is a good interviewer, and he doesn't play. He's going to ask you direct questions. He's going to hold you to the fire to give him an answer to what he's asking you. And I feel like in her mind, she has more to lose by doing that than she does to gain. Because they're not really trying to convert votes right now. They're just trying to mobilize people to the polls from what I'm seeing. So that was my first thing. My second thing is I feel like the vice president's campaign, as well as herself, are very confident in where they are right now. And I think that confidence is based on, we're going to call them unconventional campaign strategies. Let's go with that.
You
Let's go
think
with
they're
that.
gonna cheat?
Oh man, I mean, I've just never seen anything like it. And just matter of fact, here in Virginia, uh, that was yesterday. Yesterday morning, I saw that where the court overturned the removal of about 1,600 voters in Virginia. I think
I
most of them
saw
from the
that.
Virginia Beach area, and they tried to say it was just because of what their last names were. Like maybe they were, Hispanic last names, whatever the case may be. The issue was that these people, when they went through the rolls to do the audits, for me, from what I understand, that they had not proved their citizenship. And so if you can't prove your citizenship, you can't be on the voter rolls. But these 1,600 people have now been restored to the voter rolls because they're saying what Governor Youngkin has done was unconstitutional. I don't understand that, Bernie. I mean, to me, it's unconstitutional for anyone that is not a U.S. citizen to be voting in our elections. That's unconstitutional.
And from
But
what
for the
I
governor to try
understand,
to protect that, I,
yeah,
I don't understand.
the Department of Justice, our Department of Justice that we pay taxes to, is saying that they want illegal aliens to vote in the Virginia election. That's what I'm
Yes,
equating here. That's what I'm
yes,
hearing.
yes. That's
And when
absolutely
we
right.
and when we try to take them off the voter rolls, which is what we should be doing, the government, the Department of Justice, is saying we can't take them off and we have to let these illegal aliens vote in an American election.
Yes. And I'm taken aback by that. I don't understand it. And Again, so we'll call them unconventional campaign strategies,
Yeah.
but that is absolutely ridiculous that this is what we're facing at this time. So, but I think they're very confident in what they're doing. I will step out there and say in the 2020 election, when Donald Trump was screaming to the top of his lungs that the election had been stolen, um, I was very discouraged in our country and our governmental system at that time because here's my thing. Anytime something happens in our everyday lives, out on the streets, whatever you want to call it, and someone commits a crime or someone is accused of a crime, someone is going to collect some evidence. A judge is going to hear that evidence and maybe even a jury, and they're going to make a decision about whether or not it's valid, the accusation is valid or not. Correct?
Correct.
So when Donald Trump was making these allegations, no one looked at it. It went all the way up to the Supreme Court and they said they wouldn't hear the case. And I was honestly, as an American citizen, I was hurt by that because I thought that it was their job to protect the American people. And if someone made a claim that wrongdoing had occurred, it was their job to at least look at it. So it was not for me to say whether or not the election was stolen or not stolen. I'm just disappointed that no one even listened to what this supposed evidence was or heard the arguments or anything like that for the American people to be able to hear. So that just it bothers me that these are the things that are occurring in our system of government, and it doesn't sound a lot like we the people anymore.
I totally agree. Speaking of that um, strain of thought, the Democrats' platform seems to include the stifling of free speech and equating it with hate speech and potential government overreach. The First Amendment gives us, as Americans, the right to say stupid things, and any attempt to interfere with that right to say stupid things eventually empowers the government. And what are your thoughts on all that, on free speech and the First Amendment?
Well, I think it goes back to again what we were just talking about, these unconventional strategies. Um, that's part of that because if you challenge a narrative that is coming out of the Democratic Party, then they need to silence that. And that seems to be the tactic that they're using. Um, Again, it's so many things that are in conflict with the Constitution from what we're seeing happen in our country right now. It's troubling. It's really troubling. So the attack on free speech, the attack on the right to bear arms, any of those things, it is troubling to see that there is an entity waging war on our individual civil liberties, and it appears to be coming out of the Democratic Party. Um, I mean, I'm just telling you what I see. It's not a accusation, it's not a judgment, but it just looks to me like someone is attacking the civil liberties of the United States citizens.
Well, I think about this stuff all the time, and that's why we wanted to have you on the program because I wanted to make sure I'm not the only one that thinks that way.
You are
Apparently
not.
I'm not.
You are not. There are a lot more people. And here's another thing, Bernie. We don't talk about it a lot, but there is a huge migration of Black American men that are coming to the Republican Party,
Oh, yeah.
that are supporting Donald Trump, that are supporting conservatism, um, because they're starting to see the ideology of what conservatism stands for, and they're also starting to see the benefits for themselves individually and for their families. And so I feel like I've long been uh, ringing the bell for Black Americans to at least consider the Republican Party. I don't ever try to convert anybody, but I do want to give you information and have you make an educated and informed decision. And so when we look at some of the things that the Republican platform stands for, a lot of that identifies with Black Americans, the traditional family values, limited government, all of those types of things, fiscal responsibility. For those of us that are professionals and even business owners, all of those things ring true with what we are trying to accomplish. And so I see this migration happening because for so long, the Democratic Party, well, almost the Democratic Party, Black registered voters in this country accounted for 85% Democrats or voted 85% Democrats, right? Which only left about 15% to the Republicans and or independents. And so what we've seen is that the Democratic Party doesn't really have to fight for our vote, right? They don't have to offer anything. They don't have to try to make anything right for our community because we already got 85% of them. Like, what else do we need to do? And then thereby, though, at the same token, the Republican Party has done a horrible job engaging the Black community to be able to share their platform with them as well. So it's on both sides. I believe that any American that's particularly in states where you have to identify your party should never be in any party, should be an independent because that would sway that. But my point to all of that is if you take 10, 15% of that 85 from the Democratic Party and move that over to a Republican Party or even independent, that changes the face of elections from here on out in the future. And so my thing is that we have to start being smart about what our government can do for us. We've gone through decades of the Democratic Party offering the Black community all of these amazing, wonderful things. And every election, nothing's happened. We're 40
Where are
years
my
in on this thing.
where are my reparations?
You know what I mean? None of it has happened. So we keep coming back though to the same girl at the dance, right? You keep
Mhm,
asking the girl to dance. She says, "Yeah, I dance for you next song."
mhm,
Doesn't dance for you next song.
mhm.
Come back again. Can we dance next song? How many times you gonna keep coming back to that? You know,
Well,
so I
apparently,
look
we
at
keep
that.
coming back over and over and over again, and we never get that dance.
Absolutely, absolutely, and so it's just amazing to me to see our community um, being led down that path because we deserve so much more just in the form of equity in our country, like for the contributions, even as our ancestors were slaves, but even beyond that, the contributions that the Black American has put into this country far exceed any type of other immigrant that has come after us, and so for that just a level playing field, an equity state, um, because I think that, and I know I'm going on a little bit of a tangent here,
That's okay.
but I think that the Black American community forgets so easily what has occurred in our history. We're talking about recent history,
Yeah.
okay? Uh, I mean, even when it comes down to Civil Rights Act of 1964, that vote in the Senate, that was a Democrat, Strom Thurmond, I believe, that was
Yeah.
filibustering to keep the vote from happening,
Hmm.
right? Uh, I want to say it was 33 Senates, 32 Republican senators in that vote, and 26 or 27 of the Republicans voted. That's almost like 70%, whereas only half of the Democrats, or maybe a third or something like that. But the numbers were skewed. But the idea was, had the Republicans not overwhelmingly stepped up to support civil rights, that wouldn't have happened. So that
Agreed.
was the Democrats trying to blockade that, right? If you go back in history and look at Black Americans being hosed down in the streets by, fire chiefs or whatever in the southern
O'Connor.
states, Georgia, Mississippi, South Carolina, those were all Democratic governors,
Yeah.
right? Abraham Lincoln was a Republican president. I mean, we can go on and on and on about the things that should deter us from the Democratic Party, but it seems like as a community, we forget so quickly and come right back to the song and dance of "I'll dance with you the next time."
We've got to learn our history. Broderick, I got another question for you, though.
Okay.
Talk to the people. Tell them whatever's on your mind.
Man, I just so I've done podcasts as well, and the name of my podcast was X Communications. Um, and part of that at the end of every podcast, I just want people to think about things differently. You know what I mean? I want people to think for themselves. Like, understand that when you watch the news, there is someone that owns the company that owns that news, which means that is information that is being propagated by someone else. So when someone tells you something, whether it's on a news entity, whether you read it online, whatever, do some research or just ask some questions like, does this make sense? And if it doesn't, think for yourself. Don't just go down that path because somebody told you that, you know? And so as we sit here preparing for our next election. I want to say we got about 7 or 8 days left. Um, I hear so many things that are just put out there to me for our amusement to some extent, because what I've noticed in this election is that the Democratic Party does one thing and one thing well. I won't say they only do one thing, but they do one thing really well, and that's entertain us. Okay. I'm insulted by that because as a citizen of this country, as a free human being, I want you to engage me as such, but don't entertain me. I don't need no one Cardi B, Megan Thee Stallion coming out on stage. And because of that, that's why I want to vote for Vice President Harris. That means you take me as a joke. They're literally saying we can play you a song and dance, and you'll do what we tell you to do. And there's nothing on the other end of that. And so for me, I just want people to think for themselves. I want people to ask questions. I want people to say, is what's being presented to me making sense? Right? Does it work? When we hear rhetoric about Vice President Harris, one of her main statements is we're going to make the wealthy, the corporations, pay their fair share in taxes. I don't understand that. It's a couple of things wrong with that. One, because the math is off. And real quick, if you'll permit me,
Please.
uh, if I am a millionaire, right? Anybody that makes over 300 some thousand dollars a year is automatically in a 37% tax bracket for federal taxes. On the same token, a person that makes $30,000 a year is probably in an 18 to 20% tax bracket. Okay. So if I make $30,000 a year and I pay 20%, I paid $6,000 in taxes as an individual. If I make $1 million and I pay 37%, I paid $370,000 in federal taxes. Is that not my fair share? Because fair would be if there was a tax code that was a flat, call it 10% for everybody. That's fair. But I'm paying twice as much as the person that makes, 3 times, 10 times as less than I do. And that's not my fair share. And then you get upset when they say, well, they get all these loopholes and tax breaks. Okay, granted point. But if I take that $370,000 and use the government code to whittle it down from 370 to, let's say, $150,000 of my $1 million, is that still not more than the 6,000 that the person that made 30,000 more? What is the fair share? And to me, all that suggests is, again, it is playing on the emotions of the people you're trying to just draw to the polls, because it makes me feel as though she and or her team don't really understand the economics of this country. Because when you start to overtax wealthy people, corporations, all of that is just going to pass through. And what that'll mean is the corporation has to pay a higher percentage in tax. That means they have to cut expenses. And a lot of times those expenses can be salaries. It can be the number of employees that you have. It can be an increase in price of services and goods. That's all it is. But you have to be able to cut somewhere if you don't have the money to be able to pay what's being asked of you. It's the same principle in our own households, right? If we get some extra bills that we weren't expecting, or somebody raises up the price of our rent, we either got to make more money or we got to cut some expenses. Something's got to go. And so I feel like we need to have common sense in there. People bash Donald Trump because he was a businessman. He wasn't really a politician, but he ran the country as a business. And I think that we saw a lot of favorable results from that. So I, again, went down that tangent, but it comes down to people thinking like, when she says something like that, when she says we're going to make them pay their fair share, think that through and tell me what that means to you. If that sounds like that's a reasonable course of action.
Well, how about that fair share being some of that expensive jewelry that she wears every time she makes an appearance? If I'm not mistaken, those earrings that she's wearing and the necklace she wears probably around about $60,000. That would put her in the rich category. But that's another story
Easily.
for another time.
Hey man, I'm not even mad at you with that. How about that fair share be talked about, the money you're shipping out of our country right now that we don't have access to? Okay.
Well,
Let's talk about the money that's going to Ukraine and Israel and all of these other places. And then you turn around a few weeks ago, you have a hurricane in North Carolina, and you don't have money to support your own citizens there. Where's the fair share at there?
there is no fair share, but I have my own thoughts about Miss Harris. But here's the deal: we are interviewing you, and the last thing people want to hear is me. So,
That is not true. I
oh,
see you on TV all the time, so clearly someone wants to hear from you.
oh man. Well, look, here's the bottom line: how can
Okay.
people reach you if they need to?
Um, I my email. My name is Broderick, Broderick, at the number three, the letter X, the letter G Enterprises. The name of my company is 3XG Enterprises. So Broderick at 3XG Enterprises, shoot me an email. We can always connect and talk about whatever. Always glad to have a good conversation about how to move things forward because as I sit here and you know I'm involved in politics quite a bit, particularly in Northern Virginia. And so as I look at what's going on around us and what the future of this country may be, um, this is a very serious time, and it should be one that is entered into with clear heads and clear minds. So that's why I go back to I just want people to think for themselves, get your information, see if it makes sense to you. And do what's right in your heart. If you feel good at it at the end of the day, I far be it from me to say anything different. But I just want people to think for themselves.
Broderick, I tell you, I enjoy talking to you. We talk all the time, and I just thought that people would appreciate some of the things that we hold dear as Black men. And I want you to give my regards to the Black Brick Society, both of which we are members. And I just appreciate you, man. And I look forward to having you back on the program because as a business owner, you are a rarity and you bring a perspective that most people will never hear. So again, thanks for coming on the program, brother.
Thank you, General, for having me.
All
I'm not
right.
gonna let you live that one down. We will always
Uh,
do that.
all right. You take care now.
All right, sir. You too.
Well, that's about it for now. This has been the Loyal Opposition Podcast, produced in association with Fallback Productions and Veterans for America First. Please like, share, and subscribe as we try to grow the channel and protect America's middle class. Be sure to get your copy of my book, Black Values Matter, available as an ebook on Amazon, Audible, and Apple Books. And also, remember, it's okay to disagree. But if we want our country to prosper, we must insist on unity, transparency, and civility for ourselves and for our fellow citizens. Thanks for listening to the Loyal Opposition Podcast. We'll see you next week.